Hi, we're going to go over tissue notes. Actually, the first video will be on epithelial tissues. So, a little bit of introduction to what tissue is and some epithelial and what that type of tissue is. Now, what are tissues? Tissues are groups of cells that are similar in structure and functions. Okay, call them tissues. Tissue also means like fabric, so it's like the fabric of your body, fabric of organisms. These kinds of groups of cells that are sort of woven together and how they work together. In Unit 1, we learned the 4 tissue types. Connective tissue that connects. So we got bone, blood, tendons, ligaments, kind of underlayment for connecting one type of tissue to the other. The epithelial that we're going to talk about today. And muscle and nerve. My light just fell. There we go. All right, so each tissue type has distinctive structures, patterns, and functions. All right, generally, the structure determines the function. All right, to perform the specific body functions, tissues are organized into organs. Right, and they do a specific function as well, kind of more of a macro function, like the heart pumps the blood, kidneys filters the blood, and keeps osmotic pressure, and lungs, we have gas exchange. Most organs contain tissues from all 4 groups. The arrangement of these tissues determines the organ's structure and function. So how they're arranged and what type of cell is going to determine the structure and the function. Cool. Epithelial tissues. All right, they're found on surfaces either as coverings or linings. That's the main definition of epithelial tissue. Coverings would be on the outer surface of things, and maybe lining would be on the inner surface. We talk about outer surface, it could be like outer surface of like your intestines. It's going to be inside your stomach, maybe obviously your skin. Inner surface linings could be like underlayment for your skin and stuff like that. It's like it's a lining. All right. In epithelial tissue, the cells fit closely together to form sheets. And how the cells are staying together are these special junctions that you may have studied a little bit when you studied cells. You may have called them gap junctions. So maybe they're called, gap junctions. And they're literally fibers. I'll just put gap there. There you go. They're fibers that attach the cell membrane of one cell through that cell membrane of another cell, so that they bridge all of these cells together. And epithelial tissue, by the way, what characterizes it is it has a free edge. And that's an edge where the cells at the surface are not in direct contact with any other cells, or at least not bound to any other cells. And they perhaps could have fluid on the other side, on the free edge, or plasma or mucous membrane, or maybe there's just other cells there, but they're not bound to them. Now, the bottom of this layer of epithelial tissue, those cells are attached and supported by an adhesive basement membrane, is what we're going to call that. This is made of carbohydrates and proteins, and those carbohydrates and proteins actually come from the cells themselves. Okay, it could be epithelial cells that are there, but it could also be the connective tissue cells that help connect epithelial tissue with other tissue, right? Okay, so we'll study more about that later. Epithelial tissues the one thing that characterizes them, generally speaking, is they have no direct blood supply. So they don't have blood vessels running through them generally. They're called then avascular. So vascular means you're going to have some blood flow. Avascular means no blood flow, right? In most cases, they also depend, of course, on then diffusion of oxygen and nutrients, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to get any. Luckily, oxygen and carbon dioxide are nonpolar molecules and they will diffuse. Maybe nutrients too, to a point, can diffuse. And it's saying that below the epithelial tissues is a vascularized, so that's where the blood vessels are, connective tissue that we'll talk about later that has a special job of sort of nursing the epithelial cells that are above it. If well nourished, these epithelial cells can easily regenerate themselves and they have a high rate of mitosis. That's how they regenerate themselves, right? Like a body cell. So generally they're rapidly dividing so that they can protect whatever they're covering. This is an important characteristic because many epithelial tissues are subject to a good deal of friction and injury, perhaps trauma. We want to protect what's below the epithelial tissue. So, how do we classify epithelial tissue? Well, I'm glad you asked because it's very interesting. Two names. We always give epithelial tissue two names. One is for the relative number of layers, okay? And it's just two different types, single cell and multi-layer of cells, okay? So one simple is what we call one layer of cells. And that's attached to the basement membrane right here. If it's stratified, strata meaning layers or striping, then it's got more than one layer. All right? And the deepest layer is going to rest on the basement membrane. All right, so this is the basement membrane. We talked about how that could be, that's fibers that could be connected to connective tissue, usually. This is the free edge. You can see that there's no other cells that it's directly attached to. Might be next to other cells, but it's certainly not attached to them. And yeah, there's the simple. And here's the stratified. And it's kind of, yeah, the basement membrane is kind of like the glue that binds these layers of epithelial tissue to other things. So, all right. And let's see. The other part of the name is like the shape of the cells. Flattened is scale-like, and scale-like in Latin is squamous. So I like to think of it as squished. Squamous is squished. And down here is supposed to be a depiction of that, like a sideways look at this, and there's the nucleus. So that's all it might look like. It might be real long because it's squished. And the top view, though, might be a little more round or hexagonal, or because it's going to have probably a lot of other cells around it too. But so it depends on what kind of view that you're looking at to be able to determine if it's a squished squamous epithelial tissue. Say that 10 times fast. That is not easy. The next shape is cube shaped, which just really means where the length and the width are similar, length, width, height, like a cube, right? So these are similar. Yeah. And then from the top, it's going to look kind of the same as it does from the bottom, although it might be sort of hexagonal if it's kind of squished against a lot of other cuboidal cells. So we're going to call these cuboidal. They're like a dice shaped. Yeah. The last is column shaped. I love it because we call it columnar. And if you're viewing it from a side view, you're going to say, relatively speaking, there's probably more cytosol here, and that's part of its function. There's this little nucleus down here. And from the top, though, it'll look the same as the squamous and the cuboidal, probably. You got to know if you're looking at the side view, and how you do. Well, it depends on you. Depends on also the type of location that they came from. That'll help you decide what its name is, because the location is going to hint at the function. And remember, the structure determines the function. So layered epithelial tissue, stratified epithelial tissue are always named according to the shape of the cells at the free edge. Right? So up here, this is the free edge, and you can see that they're very squished. So this will be your stratified squamous epithelial tissue. That'll be the name of this guy. And you can just say ET for epithelial tissue. All right, so remember, named after free edge as well. The two-part name is always followed by either epithelium or epithelial tissue, but yeah, remember we're going to say ET, extraterrestrial. Epithelial tissue. Just kidding. All right, so different types of epithelial tissue. All right, so that looks familiar, right? Can you guess it? Just saying. It's, yeah, simple because it's one layered and squamous because it's flat. Its description, well, kind of obvious. Single layer of flat cells, right? Very smooth, by the way. These guys are always found very smooth. There's no cilia, there's no projections, there's no microvilli. And that's part of its function. Yeah. Its location is going to be the alveoli of the lungs. So this has got to be thin because it needs to allow for oxygen and carbon dioxide to diffuse either into the bloodstream or back out into the air. So it definitely needs to be flat and thin so that it doesn't have very far to go. The alveoli of lungs, by the way, we're going to learn later, they're the air sacs of lungs that fill up and hopefully do the gas exchange there, not the airways that where air just travels to get to them. Also, where this tissue is found is capillaries. So you'll find in the capillaries are made out of simple squamous epithelial tissue, and that's why carbon dioxide is able to diffuse into the blood and oxygen out of the blood because in the capillaries only, because the capillaries are so thin, they're only made with this simple squamous epithelial tissue. I don't know why I can't say squamous. But also all the blood vessels, all the arteries and veins that come to and go out of the blood vessels or that are leading to and from, they're also all lined with a simple squamous epithelial tissue on the inside because it's very smooth and it's going to keep clotting from occurring. Yeah, clots can occur when there's just rough edges. That's just a thing. Because if there's a rough edge, it's usually because there's a break, and then it needs to form a clot because there's going to be bleeding, and it needs to fix it, stop the bleed, and fix or repair the damage. Okay, so its function. We talked about diffusion of gases. In the lungs, right? Also in the capillaries. Also, diffusion of nutrients and waste. Oops, running out of space here. And that's in the capillaries. Yeah, you don't have diffusion of gases in arteries and veins generally. Unless it's like a venous sinuses. I guess that's still collecting blood from capillaries. So yeah, only capillaries are thin enough really, generally. And it's smooth to prevent clotting, so that's part of its function. All right. And you might be wondering what these pictures are doing underneath. Yeah, just this edge here is lined with the simple squamous epithelial tissue. All right. And on the left is the microscope view. On the right, it's kind of a cartoon etching so they can really see what's going on and all the cells with their nuclei. Yeah, these are different cells over here. So I'm not sure. Maybe this is in, yeah, just covering parts of organs, stuff like that. These look like different cells over here. Not exactly sure where this tissue came from, but the basement membrane for the simple squamous epithelial tissue is underneath, and then the free edge is that location. Very cool. All right, so we're going to talk about the other cells that are simple. They're still single layered, right? And can you guess its name? Yep. Simple cuboidal or cubital epithelial tissue. And it's thin too. It needs to be thin, probably also because things are traveling through it. It's still got its free edge and basement membrane, which I'm just going to abbreviate BM. You know what I mean. Description: single layer of cube shaped cells. True. Large nuclei. In comparison, it does look like it has a pretty fairly looking large nuclei proportionally in the center. Yeah. So instead of it being looking kind of squished to one side, it looks pretty evenly in the center. Its function, well, first its location, I guess. Kidney tubules, ducts of exocrine glands as well. So yeah, this forms exocrine tissue as well as helps the kidneys filter the blood or at least absorb back what kinds of things your body needs. Yeah, because in the Bowman's capsule, all the plasma and dissolved molecules and molecules floating in the blood get squirted into yeah into the filtrate, and then your body's going to absorb back what it wants. So yeah, its function is absorption of useful things, I guess, back into the blood. Remember, blood cells are too big to be secreted like that, so they always stay in the blood. So it's good for your body to be able to break down bacteria so that then you could actually excrete some of it through your kidneys. Yeah, another function will be the exocrine function, which we're going to talk about soon, is to make a product and release it. And we call that secretion. Things like sweat, saliva, great words there. Love those words. Other favorite words: mucus, urine filtrate, and lactation secretions, right? So when you look at this, you're seeing these are like going to be actually columns that you're seeing a cross section of. Here, I'll screw it up, and you can see there's bunches of these simple cuboidal cells that are making a product, and then it's going to either dump directly into the blood, um, or the exocrine gland duct. Okay, so I guess it could also be in exocrine or in endocrine too, but endocrine glands don't have ducts, or they're not even glands, they're just endocrine organs. I'll just say and endocrine. So we're going to talk about that more later. Here's the simple cuboidal epithelial tissue, the free edge, and the basement membrane. Cool, cool, cool. You'll learn more about the kidneys when we talk about it. Just note that the function of these is going to be a little bit absorption, but also secretion. So it needs to have enough cytosol and energy to make these products, and then, yeah, give them off when you need them. All right. All right. Next type of cells. Can you guess the name? Looking at this simplified, sort of cartoony picture. Yep. Simple columnar epithelial tissue. All right. And there's two types, but if you had to describe it, you would just say, yeah, tall cells, one layer. So single tall cells. I feel like I'm filling out a like dating profile on cells. Single and tall. Has goblet cells oftentimes. And goblet cells, which we'll find out later, are a type of exocrine cell, and they're going to secrete mucus. So I always think of like a goblet full of mucus, which you could drink in one swallow, right? Because the mucus would just like all go down at once. Yeah, if that produces a good graphic picture that helps you remember that, you're welcome. Yeah, goblet cells. So location and function. Actually, well, I guess we have three types really. The one with no cilia and no microvilli. So maybe we didn't quite cover too much on what cilia and microvilli really are. So up here, I'm just going to draw a little bit of silly stuff. Yeah, that's so silly. They're just projections of the cytoskeleton, microtubules, and they like have a waving motion. They have a power stroke, and then ATP um, gets used, and then they go back and forth, right? And they're usually generally trying to move substances one direction. All right, they move stuff like they sweep. Usually, it's mucus or other fluid across the surface. Could be molecules too in the fluid. Okay. And the other type is the microvilli, which just are projections of the cell to increase surface area. So if I had to draw it, it would be just part of the columnar cell. Oh, I didn't mean to fill that in. Pretend I didn't do that. Here we go. Yeah, see how it just increases surface area at that free edge so that it could probably absorb things, maybe? Yeah. So yeah, that microvilli is really helpful for doing that. I'm gonna have to abbreviate here. And that's always at the free edge. All right, the microvilli or the cilia. If you have it, it's always at the free edge. In this case, is a picture of where there's no cilia and no microvilli. All right, so if there's no cilia and no microvilli, it's generally going to be lining the stomach. Not a ton of absorption going on here, so we don't need to increase its surface area. And we do have mucus producing cells, but in this case, they're a different type. They're not actually the goblet cells. They're actually called the foveolar cells. Yeah, and they produce the mucus that protects your stomach from digesting itself. Yeah, do you ever wonder like how the stomach acids don't digest the cells that are lining the stomach? It's because the cells have these foveolar cells next to them that are going to produce the mucus. And though they have shown, yeah, you do absorb a little bit of water and maybe glucose in your stomach, but generally your stomach is a bag for digestion to hold foods and to store it and start digesting it. And then it's going to drain into the intestines. Lining the small intestines, coincidentally enough, are the ones with the microvilli. So the projections are increasing surface area so that in your intestines, you could absorb more nutrients. That's the intestine's job generally, especially small intestines. Did I say lining? Oh, wow. Okay. Lining the small intestines. It's also going to secrete enzymes, and they have their own product in there. They have their own sort of cells, so may also digestive enzymes are going to maybe be secreted a little bit, although most of it comes from the pancreas, right? And the pancreas is also a type of glandular endocrine and exocrine gland. Actually, we'll talk about in a second. All right, so secretion of enzymes, absorption of nutrients, definitely happening in the small intestines, and then in the large intestines, you're going to have water being absorbed, and you need to make sure that your gut lining gets maintained as well. And I think you probably have heard of some medication that actually interrupts the production of the lining here and these cells that protect, yeah, protect you, but also help absorb nutrients. Now, the third type, though, the cilia, generally lining the fallopian tubes so it can sweep the eggs towards the uterus. Yeah, did you ever wonder how the egg knows how to go to the uterus? Because it's being swept at that certain direction by the cilia. Oh, the lining fallopian tubes, the egg. Okay, so I meant to put sweeps the egg to the uterus. All right. Oh, it's uterus. Uterus. Oh gosh. Sure. And you can see them here. Like the nucleus is pretty big, but you can see how the sides are much taller than the top. And I don't see any cilia or any microvilli, so this is probably the lining of your stomach. All right, very cool. There's the free edge and the basement membrane. We're going to do BM, right? So there's your simple columnar epithelial tissue. Cool. So we're going to study some more. This one actually is one of my favorites because it's super hilarious name. Right here. Yeah. So you may not be able to guess it from the picture because it's a fake. It's trying to deceive you. Okay. The full name of this guy is pseudo stratified ciliated columnar epithelial tissue. Yeah. Fun word in anatomy. And you're like, what is that doing there? Well, it's a good thing. Pseudo meaning false, right? Stratified meaning layered. So it's not actually layered. This is actually a single layer of cells. Just some of them are not as tall as others. And, it's good to have that. We might have it in lining your trachea. And yeah, it's ciliated. So it's going to be moving the mucus up so you can cough it up. That's your voice box, by the way, or your larynx. Yeah, they have the goblet cells so that it can produce the mucus. Okay. We talked about the goblet cells. Yeah, they're type of exocrine cell. Sorry, like exocrine. Yes, exocrine. Description is single layer of cells, but they're of differing heights. Location is it's going to line the trachea and most of the upper respiratory tract, not the alveoli. That's going to be the simple squamous epithelial tissue for gas exchange. This guy is just going to make sure that air can get to the alveoli and from the alveoli. So it lines trachea and most of your upper respiratory tract, including your nasal passageways. Its function is the cilia is meant to propel mucus and dust away from your alveoli and your lungs. The cilia propel mucus and dust away from the lungs, right? You don't want that junk stuck down in your lungs. Otherwise, you can't do gas exchange efficiently. And I guess it goes towards the throat, where you can either cough it up or you can swallow it then at that point. By the way, a fancy term for throat is the pharynx that we're going to talk about later. Again, there's a free edge here, and you can sort of see some cilia in the microscope a little bit. This is not a great picture. So cilia are at the free edge. And just see how the nuclei are like stacked in there, but a lot of them are different. It's not symmetrical. So perhaps that's how you could identify it. Also, here's goblet cell right here. Yeah, sounds like goblin too. Yeah, these are the cells themselves. So I guess we could just label it there. I don't know if you need to label it again. You won't be labeling it on your flashcard picture side. You'll be labeling the name on the facts side. Okay, that's the basement membrane. Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, that cilia is really important. If the cilia doesn't work effectively, you can't cough things up as much. A lot of times, physicians will they can actually prescribe a supplement. It's not even a prescription. N-acetylcysteine actually assists in that movement, and they use that for cystic fibrosis patients. It actually helps people with asthma. I know because it helps me too. And that ATP is really important for the cilia. So hopefully you don't have problems with that. It's really been helpful for me. Okay, looking at this, they're at the free edge. Remember that here is the free edge here. What do you think this is? What kind of cell? Stacks of cells, yeah, kind of at the free edge. What do they look like? Yeah, what's going to be the name of this guy? Yeah, it's layered, so it's stratified. And they look flat at the free edge, so we'll say squamous epithelial tissue. Well, I guess this description has many layers of cells. Generally, you don't get very many stratified that aren't squamous, okay? Because they just tend to flatten out at the free edge, but some of them don't. We have a couple different types. We have keratinized and non-keratinized, okay? So the keratinized has the protein called keratin. And it's a tough waterproofing protein so that you don't evaporate your water. Otherwise, your cells would dry out and you would dry out. This is what makes up your epidermis, your regular skin. And it protects underlying tissue. Over here. Reduces body water loss. Yep. And yeah, that's what's generally in your skin. Just to like show you what's happening in this picture while we have it is down here you have the basement membrane, of course, and above it are the cells that didn't look squamous yet. They're going to be undergoing rapid mitosis. Okay, and there's a couple different names for them. We're going to study that when we do the skin. And there's a name for that layer. That's kind of the papillary layer, some people call that. But these cells are doing rapid mitosis. The granulosum layer, I believe. And then as the cells divide, they get pushed upwards, right? And the nutrients, by the way, there's never nutrients directly in epithelial tissue, but there are blood vessels down the bottom. So as the cells get pushed up, they get pushed away from the nutrients and they tend to die. Yeah, this is at the free edge, all dead cells. Yeah, but that's good because then you don't have to worry about any, cells saying, no, we're damaged when you scratch yourself and stuff like that. And those cells will just get replaced by the rapidly dividing cells at the bottom layer. Okay, so nutrients have to diffuse, but it won't happen if the cells are quite a bit farther away. There we go. So blood vessels down here, the connective tissue under your skin, and there's a special type of cells, of tissue and cells, like a whole bunch of other things with the cells, the connective tissue that has the capillaries and nerves and stuff like that. All right, cool, cool, cool. So the non-keratinized, all right, still important and for protection, but actually has mucus producing cells at the free edge to protect it because that doesn't have keratin to protect it. Where it's located would be the moist lining of the esophagus, Lover, awesome word. Yep. It's a barrier to pathogens, just like actually your skin, your regular outside epidermal layer is a barrier to pathogens too. So that applies to both. So I'll just do that. There, that's supposed to be pathogens. And it's resistant to abrasion. All right. Here's a little example of that and what it might look under the microscope. It's not a very good copy of it. Free edge, many layers of skin cells, and we will talk about those when we talk about the skin. There's your basically stratified squamous epithelial tissue. And your basement membrane with the connective tissue that's going to nurse it. Might be areolar. We'll learn about that too. All right, so this next type, it's really hard to tell what the cells are at the free edge because it depends on whether the tissue has been stretched or not. If it's being stretched, the cells are going to look flattened. If they're not being stretched, the cells might look cuboidal-ish or even columnar. Who knows? So they transition back and forth between these two shapes, and they have proteins to help keep them together, but also stay. They may have some elastin, maybe some elastic qualities to it, so that it doesn't tear. So these are transitional epithelial tissue. I guess I could have just said ET. Okay. Surface cells change shape from round to flat depending on how much the organ is stretched, and stressed, I guess. So you don't want that organ to rip. Can you imagine where this might be found at? Think about where this might be found at, where you're going to need it to stretch and to go back to, and then stretch and not tear. Actually is only one specific place that you find it. It's in the bladder. Yep, you guessed it. But also in the ureters and the urethra. So coming to the bladder with the ureters and going out of the bladder through the opening in your body to the outside world without the urethra. That's how we remember that. Urethra is going through the opening to the outside air. You're throwing urine around, I guess. Maybe not. Its function is to permit expansion without tearing the lining. So here's the free edge. There's your transitional epithelial tissue. And the basement membrane. All right, so we're getting close to being done with epithelial tissue. Yeah, not a lot of stratified columnar, although I've heard possibly of some situations where you might have it. But we're not going to do connective tissue yet. Next time we'll do that. We're going to talk about glands. Glands are a type of epithelial tissue because they form from epithelial tissue as well. So their progenitor was a type of epithelial tissue, so they're related. A gland, by the way, it consists of one or more cells. So you could have a single-celled gland, yeah. One or more cells that make and secrete a product. That's important definition. Their secretions are protein molecules, generally, in water solution. Yeah, glands obtain materials that are needed to make their secretions from the blood. So they need to have a good blood supply. So we talked about single cell glands. They're called unicellular glands, like a unicycle. Just one tire, sure. And goblet cells are one example of that. They are unicellular and they make and secrete mucus. We also talked about foveolar cells. And there's other cells in your stomach that are going to make and secrete product too that we could call these types of unicellular glands. I'm not going to worry about that too much. I'm just letting you know that it's out there and it's a thing. All right, so the second type is endocrine glands. We may have talked about endocrine system. That's kind of the indoor signaling system of your body. And you do have endocrine glands, though it's the tissue itself could be a type of epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue are very key in your integumentary system, but in almost all other systems, they're pretty important too. Endocrine glands, though, are generally ductless, and they lose their connection to epithelial tissue during development, so they're not connected to the surface of anything. Their secretions are generally hormones, and hormones go directly into the blood. That's the definition of the hormones. The hormones are signaling molecules. They go directly into your capillaries and make things happen. All right, so yeah, you got blood coming in and going out of this gland. I'm going to just do it here. Guess we should probably have arrows that are going in. And yeah, capillaries will be kind of a network, web-like, kind of interconnected. So this is the blood going in and out and around this layer of endocrine cells, usually cuboidal, right? Sometimes other things, but they can't be squamous. They can't be squished. They need to have a big enough cytosol to be able to do, transcription and make these protein products and have enough ATP to do that, and a lot of organelles doing that. Some examples are your thyroid gland, your pituitary gland, your adrenal gland, and pancreas. Pancreas is slightly confusing because it functions as an endocrine gland when it's making insulin and glucagon right into the blood. But pancreas also could be a type of exocrine gland where you're secreting a product onto what's considered not the inside of you. All right, so the outside of you, exiting, exocrine. Exocrine glands, what make them different is they retain their ducts. So they're going to save up their product and then squirt it all at once. And they're connected to the epithelial tissue that they develop from. Pancreas will be connected to your small intestines through the pancreatic duct. The secretions will empty through the duct as well. Yep, they collect in the duct, secrete through the duct onto the epithelial surface, found both internally and externally, like on your skin and stuff like that. So some examples would be like sweat glands, sebaceous glands, or oil glands. We have other types too. Your pancreatic duct, as it's secreting digestive enzymes like amylase and other protein digesting enzymes too. And also your pancreas also has to neutralize all that stomach acid too. So it's a very important organ. Can't really replace that. Also your mammary glands, when we talked about the lactose product, yeah, they make that too. So I guess internally would be considered a surface that's like a hollow organ, like your intestines. The inside of your intestines are actually not the inside of you, because you could swallow, I guess, a paperclip or something, and you would poop it out, hopefully. But it technically would not have made it inside of you. Okay, so any products that are secreted on that surface of the intestines where the food is, that's considered outside of you. It's considered exocrine. And yeah. Here's an example. This is sort of a cartoonized example. Like when you were looking at other tissue, you might have seen a cross section. Let me see. Like if you see a cross section, you're not going to see the column of the cells, right? Maybe you'll see a cross section that looks a little bit like this. Yeah, so I guess you could call that simple cuboidal, but it's going to be like a tall, stacked, hollow tube of these single-celled, probably either columnar or cuboidal, perhaps, or that cross section could have been up here because this is the epithelial tissue surface, and it kind of invaginates to help make the duct. There's the gland part. This is the exocrine gland tissue. And maybe you have some smooth muscle there that helps squirt the product onto the exocrine surface. And I believe your salivary glands do that. That's why they like hurt when you eat something sour and they're trying to like dilute it. They think, oh, there's too much acid in your mouth or whatever. Yeah. So maybe there's some smooth muscle there. And that's, remember, this is the surface. It could be the inside of your intestines, it could be the outside of your skin, stuff like that. All right. So, usually, I should have put that there. Usually simple columnar or cuboidal cells. Forgot to add that, sorry. Columnar. Okay, and that kind of rounds out what we're going to do for epithelial tissue. Next video, we're going to do connective tissue. All right, so stay safe and sane, my friends, and until next time, thanks a lot for coming with us on this journey of tissue.